We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the Alfred University Bergren Forum. My name is John D'Angelo and I am a professor of chemistry and the coordinator and host for the spring 2025 season of the Bergren Forum. This is episode 4. Today's date is Thursday, February 20th, 2025. And for those of you attending the forum online here in Western New York, it is a cloudy and surprise, cold day, but inside Nevins Theater, the Powell Campus Center, it is cozy and the coffee and tea are hot and free. Before starting, we have a few announcements. First, next Thursday's forum will be given by Director of the AU Writing Center, Chloe Hansen. Chloe's talk will be on dying. There are some other events this week to announce. Students, it is FAFSA filing time for the 2025-2026 academic year. Consult mide@alfred.edu or the Financial Aid Office for the code numbers for AU. The Pondering Pedagogy Planning Committee will be hosting tomorrow at 12:20 until 1:10 and next Tuesday from 4:30 to 5:30 in Olin 400, a discussion on the role of testing and learning. Later today, right here in Nevins, there will be an arts speaker series today given by Angela Washko. The event will start at 4:30 p.m. Angela is committed to telling complex and unconventional stories about the media we consume from unusual perspectives. This Saturday in the nightclub from 3 p.m. until 5 p.m., there will be a tea party hosted by the Students Activities Board. The Institute for Cultural Unity will be hosting a Student of Color Leadership Conference Saturday from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. in the Student Leadership Center. Guest glass artist Arthur Wilson will be giving a glass demonstration in the Glass Studios later today, immediately after the forum, and a lecture tomorrow in Bins 106 at 4:30. The AU Dance Theater is hosting an evening of dance starting at 8 p.m. tonight, tomorrow night, and Saturday night, all in Miller Theater. Finally, another sad announcement. It was recently posted that Marilyn Ann Hoyt passed away a week ago today at her home in Bergren, New York. For those of you who would sometimes get food upstairs in the pre-pandemic times, you probably remember Marilyn as the very friendly cashier who was a mainstay at Alfred for about 20 years. There will be services at the Bender, Brown, and Powers Funeral Home in Canastillo on the 22nd, that is Saturday, from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. Without further ado, today's forum will be given by Shelly Freyn, Alfred University Associate Professor of Marketing, and Kerry Kautzman, Alfred University Professor of Spanish, and along with a couple of students. The title of their talk is Barcelona and Madrid, Exploring the Intersections of Business and Culture. I didn't have both your names ahead of time. I'm sorry.
Hear me? Okay. Everybody can hear me okay? Isn't this a great day to talk about warm, sunny Spain and go on a nice trip to Spain today? So I am Shelly Freyn, Associate Professor of Marketing. Let the students introduce themselves.
I'm Morgan Wise. I'm majoring in art and design and minoring in marketing.
I'm Sienna Sheflu. I'm currently an MBA student, but in my undergrad, I went here with a major in marketing and minors in accounting and analytics.
And I'm Kerry Kautzman.
Okay. So, go. So we're going to talk about exploring the intersections of business and culture. Kerry, of course, being culture, me being business, but they all overlap. That would be helpful. Right. How do we do it? There we go. So introduction. So a little background before we go on this trip. Marketing can go anywhere. And I have a real love of travel. In my previous university, I actually lived in Ireland for 8 weeks with students. And we also went to Australia and New Zealand. And I thought it was time to do some marketing at Alfred. So I set up a class with Carrie, and Carrie had an interest in nationalism in Spain, and myself international marketing. So we kind of came together, and then with the help of Sienna and some other students, we did a little recruiting session. We had the international club along with the marketing club have a big dinner, and I don't know, what was attendance, 30 or 50? I don't remember. 30, we had between 30 and 40 students, and we had several students talk about traveling abroad. And then we did kind of a pitch for Spain. Before the session, we created great big passports, and we had them all over Powell, come to this session. So it went really, really well. We ended up with 9 students, marketing or art. And I thought that was kind of an interesting combination, and it really came in handy when we got to Barcelona for sure. Many of them had not traveled before. In fact, we had one student that had never been on a plane. So it was really a wonderful experience to get them traveling abroad. Here's a little breakdown on the class, and here's a picture of everyone. We did a B block, which was 1 credit hour, and then, which is not enough time to talk about Spain. But we had 1 hour, and then I broke them into teams. They talked about current events, so we could get kind of up to speed on current events. And then we hit topics like the differences between Barcelona and Madrid. Carrie came in and talked about current topics, especially there were 2 festivals going on when we got there. So she filled us in on that. Of course, political, legal, socioeconomic. I had one MBA student that really wanted to go, and I had her dig into marketing laws. So we were slightly prepared. There's a lot to learn. And then of course at the trip, it was a 2 credit hour, and I had every day they had to do a journal, and I encouraged pictures because it is marketing. So what are brands doing out there? What cultural differences are out there? And then they did a reflection paper. So I'm going to hand it over to some of the students. Sienna, you're starting with Madrid, or I'm sorry, Morgan is. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the museums that were visited. Parliament, we went to Madrid first and then Barcelona and looked at different parliaments. There was, of course, a festival going on, and there was some really cool marketing going on, along with some great experiences with a marketing firm in Barcelona and Madrid. So now Morgan.
All right. I'm going to start with the Prado Museum, which is a very famous museum located in Madrid. Spain is known for its art and architecture in Barcelona a lot, which we'll get into later with Gaudi, the famous architect. But for now, I'm going to talk about the Prado Museum. I picked specifically a work that I snuck a picture of in this museum. So this is called The Black Dog by Francisco de Goya. And basically in the Prado Museum, there was an entire dark room made up of his black painting series. And they were really interesting because all of these paintings were actually found in his house that he lived in. And these were all done after his more famous paintings were done. So anyways, what they did basically is they cut out all of these paintings in his house on his walls and put them in this museum. And so I was just really interested in that, and I thought that was really cool. And then I added this as well. So this is just kind of to show you the art that's not necessarily in the famous museums in Madrid. This picture right here was taken right outside of the Prado Museum. It was local artists selling their work or prints, things like that. This picture in the middle was actually in the museum, but I wasn't necessarily focusing on the sculpture. I was focusing on the painting in the back. So there were a lot of students or rising artists there that get to go in and try to recreate paintings. And so that's what that is back there. And then this picture over here is of an artist like actually painting right in front of you. And so I just thought those were very interesting in Madrid because I was expecting it all in Barcelona.
Okay, so then one of our first days in Madrid, we also got to visit their parliament, which was really cool. We really got to see a behind the scenes and get inside their history that we had learned about in class. Our tour was given by a very high up journalist as well as a congressman, member of parliament,
A conservative one.
a conservative member of parliament, and a more a journalist, so you know. So our whole tour, as we were going through, we could kind of sense the tension between these two parties which were giving our tour, which was very interesting to see. And there is a lot of tension between Catalonia and like the rest of Spain. And even when we kind of asked about things like that in this tour, the member of parliament would brush it off and be like, "Oh, that's not an issue," you know. The architecture was really great. It was definitely a very like upscale, professional kind of place, which we'll talk a little differently about the one in Barcelona. But it was really cool to be inside their parliament. And I think Carrie wants to say something about.
So democracy in Spain is about the same age as the parents of our college students, right? It was the first democratic elections were in 81, right? So 1981, this is the copy of the Constitution, which is a document that's very symbolic for them. And I wanted to talk too, we're inside the parliament here, and transitioning from dictatorship to democracy wasn't totally smooth, and there was an attempted coup that failed, and they have chosen not to repair the bullet holes. And so when we took our pictures here, we were taking them under the bullet holes from when the general civilian population decided to back democracy. And I think the painting up above, this is a famous painting for Spaniards symbolizing the solidarity that this new democracy is supposed to represent, and is in direct contrast to the way the journalist and the Partido Popular, the Conservative Party parliament member, got along. Oh, now San Isidro. I was really glad to go when we did. I mean, the history is nice, but also it's the biggest party in Madrid, which is the Festival of San Isidro. And so at night, we saw a big concert in the Plaza Mayor. During the day, we went over a couple neighborhoods to the smaller of the two fairgrounds. There's a bigger one. And we saw all the families celebrating San Isidro with their picnics, and there was a smaller stage there. So it was great to see the party. Do you want to talk about this? Yeah. All right.
We also did a walking history tour through the park there. And here, this bottom picture here, we're actually standing inside one of like their bunker type structures from the Civil War with 1936. In 1936. So it was cool to see that kind of history that's still fairly recent. 1936 being a lot closer than our Civil War, Revolutionary War and stuff. And we got to see some sculptures. And also in the class before we went to Spain, we did learn that there is a high elderly population in Spain. So when we were leaving the park, we actually saw a little like playground for seniors. And it had like exercise things, little bike pedals, balancing kind of thing. It was cool because instead of like a regular swing slide for little kids, they're playing to what their higher population is there. This was one of my favorite parts. We got to see a large scale marketing campaign taking place completely by coincidence. So we were walking down what's basically Madrid's Fifth Avenue one day, and we saw this huge wall set up, and we're like, oh, it's Bridgerton, like that's cool. Pretty wall. We're like, let's go take pictures in front of it. And then the next day we were walking through and there was a huge crowd of people. So we're like, well, we got to see what's going on. They had a whole string quartet. They had people in costumes from the show. They were handing out flowers as well as little flyers, basically promoting the show. So it was really cool to see such a large scale marketing campaign taking place in a different country as well, and completely by accident. We also, in both Madrid and Barcelona, we got to visit the Manifesto marketing agency, and they do everything from strategy to creative work for marketing campaigns. And they do a lot of the very large scale campaigns in Spain. So we got to have a whole talk about that, as well as breaking into groups to do kind of case studies on an actual case that they had done 6 months prior. So we got to say what we would do for a campaign and a commercial, things like that. And then we got to see what they actually did, which was really cool, and get feedback on our ideas as well. And here is just all of us at the marketing agency with our speaker, as well as all their awards, which marketing agencies in the US also display their awards. So that is not a cultural difference there. We also, our last day in Madrid, we went over to a smaller town we took a train to.
Alcalá de Henares.
I tried to practice, I couldn't do it. But so we took the train over there, and there were a lot of small businesses there, different than what we'd been seeing in the heart of the city. And when we got there, we were really hungry. So we're looking around for somewhere to eat, and everything's closed. And then we're like, oh, it's 2:00. So we experienced the Spanish siesta by accident, and we're very hungry. But it was a beautiful town. Everything, it was very quiet. Nothing was open. And it was just a beautiful, like, serenity, everything. It was great to be there. That was one of my favorite parts, probably, because we got to see more of their way of life than just the downtown city and the tourists and things like that. And then when we were there, we needed a little rest break. So we ended up walking into a university that happened to be right in that square there, like back, if that back building there. And right when I walked in, I saw these political cartoons, which are about our history. Like you can see, and theirs as well, but you could see Barack Obama and stuff. And I thought that was kind of cool. They were pretty big, like it was a project that the students had worked on. And it was also very silent in there because they were studying for their big exams. Like, as you can see, we have a hallway to ourselves in a university on a weekday, which is unheard of. And I think Morgan's going to add on here.
Yeah, so all right. So like just kind of like going off of the education, I have a friend that lives in Madrid that my cousins actually had her over here for exchange. And so that's how I met her. And so when I was in Madrid, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to meet up with you. And so I added this photo of the train station, which I learned myself. I basically left the group, went on my own to meet up with Julia. And she talked to me a lot about their education system. And I learned that they have a very selective test that everyone needs to take if they want to get into higher education. And how they do on that test determines what specific majors they're allowed to even consider as options. She is going to school for pharmacy. She did like exponential, amazing on her test. But not everybody that takes this test has that opportunity to do those things based on just what your score is. And so I thought that was a really interesting difference than our education here. I also learned a lot about driving there. Julia's my age, 21 years old, and she still does not have her driver's license because it takes years for them to get a driver's license. There's so many more tests that they have to take, and it's so much more expensive than what it is here. So that's a longer process. I also learned while we were there that they had just recently put in bans on specific years of cars because of the pollution. We could see the pollution in the air. That's kind of how bad it was in that area at the time. And so what they did is they were like, if a car's past this specific year, it's not allowed to be on the roads anymore.
Okay. So when we went to Alcalá de Henares, we left from the not beautiful side of Atocha, right? We left on the commuter trains, And so we got to see how people get in and out of the city every day, and also where the 2004 terrorist attacks had occurred, right? We were on the commuter trains that had gotten bombed. I mean, different trains, but same place. And then we get out to Alcalá de Henares, which has an important university that was testing and is also the birthplace of Cervantes. And so we went to his house. And then this is Brian Natunga, who many of you remember, has graduated and is in Columbus now. And he chose to take his picture with Quixote as opposed to Sancho Panza, which makes him an idealist.
So we then actually took a high-speed train from Madrid to Barcelona, which is about the distance of driving like from here to New York City. And it only took us 2 hours by train. And you really don't realize how fast the train is going until you stand up if you've never been on a high-speed train, and then you're a little wobbly. But it really shows the extravagance of the Spain infrastructure and how much more efficient it is. And we really don't have high-speed trains in the US. So hopefully soon, because that would make travel a lot easier. If you want to introduce Barcelona.
So we're going to head over to Barcelona now. So you've seen Madrid. And we're going to talk a little bit about Catalonia Pride that we actually saw there and experienced. We're also I'm going to discuss the tourist traps in Barcelona and our adventure at the police station. So those are the unplanned in the itinerary. And of course, Morgan's going to talk a little bit about Gaudi, Parliament, and then our last experience at the marketing agency. Oh, it's you.
All right. So an even more famous artist is Picasso. And we got to go to a Picasso museum, which I was really excited about. And so I went ahead and added these 2 photos. This first one over here is actually like academic work of his. You can see in this specific one, it looks like the bottom's even a bit unfinished. But that's what Picasso's known for, right? Paintings. Picasso is a painter. And so when I saw ceramics in the Picasso Museum, I got so excited because I was like, wait, Picasso does more than painting. And I'm a ceramics artist. So it was just really interesting. So yeah, I just thought I'd add those 2 to kind of compare the differences. You can see similarities and differences within his work. And just to point out that Picasso is more than just a painter.
Everybody want to know the story about the police station? The first picture, though, is, I believe this was Madrid. This first picture is actually Madrid. And of course, Brian is friends with everyone. And he came up to the officers that were on horses and said, "Can we have a picture?" And they're like, "Sure." Now, would this happen in New York City? They'd tell you to get lost, right? But they were super friendly. We got several pictures with the horses. But we actually had the same experience in Madrid. Natalie Narfarchione, who is a senior here, and several of her friends were out a little bit later one night. And they, yeah, I was probably sleeping. Anyways, they had their phone out to get directions. And someone with a scooter comes flying by and grabs the phone right out of her hand. So she lost her phone. So any of the younger crowd, what's it like to lose a phone? It's like your arm, right? So anyways, long story short, we went over to the police station to file a report. And I'm sure they are pros at stolen phones. They've heard this a million times, right? We were basically told it's going to be about an hour. So we're like, okay, in New York, 5 hours, right? It was an hour. We filled out the paperwork. Everybody was very polite. It was clean. Someone took a picture of us waiting in the police station. But then we went and met with the police officer. He was fluent in 3 languages that he was speaking all at the same time. Like to his colleague, he was speaking Catalonia and, and then English with us. He was so kind and taking down all the information, politely listening to us. And again, I'm sure he's heard the story many times. He actually did talk about how bad the crime was there with this new scooter thing because they can fly in and grab stuff. What I thought was really unique is when he got done, explained that they'd gotten new uniforms, and he really respected that she was a student. And he said, "I want to give you my patch from my old uniform." Now I don't think we'd see that in the US. So it just was a really wonderful experience in the police station. And then Natalie,
I really wanted that patch.
yeah. You might be able to bribe Natalie. I don't know. But basically just a really true experience of, the police system there. And Carrie, you're going to talking on this one.
So this is a Dutch entrepreneur who has spent his career in Spain, sometimes in Madrid, but mostly in Barcelona, and has done a variety of projects, all built around soccer or football. And right now he is the CFO of a company called Podactiva, and they use tech to chip up a person or load them up with sensors, and then follow them on the football pitch, and then they personalize their shoes, right? And so he's got pictures, and it's all the famous soccer players in his gear, and this guy's beside them, and then they're tailoring their shoes. And so he was a great opportunity for the students to listen to the difference between the Barca Football Club and Real Madrid Football Club, and how the two clubs represent the different national tensions. And
Yeah, so basically Barcelona, they raise their kids from birth to play soccer, right? They have schools that are invested in it. Their elementary schools, their high schools, they're invested in soccer, and they take pride in developing their kids into these amazing soccer or football players. Madrid, on the other hand, they recruit big names, right? So their soccer teams are more well known for their recruitment. And so that's kind of the biggest difference, I would say, between them. But with sports, like football in general, they have a big rivalry, which was fun to learn about there. Every time. So this is me, Natalie, other Natalie, and Brian, and we actually took it upon ourselves one evening to go to a soccer game. This was in Barcelona, so we got to watch Barcelona play. They did, in fact, win, which was super exciting. But it was super different than going to a football game here. You could see the security lined up. I mean, a lot of security lined up, kind of right behind us. They also chanted the entire time. There was never a quiet time in the stadium. I know here, like for football games, as soon as the play starts, because it's 5 seconds long, everyone shuts up, and then everyone's like, whatever, because whatever happened. Here it was like just constant chants the whole time, and we're like trying to fit in, like saying the chants. It was really fun. Barcelona scored a goal right here on this one. Like, we really just had a phenomenal time, and it was a great experience.
Okay, now moving on to when we were at Manifesto in Barcelona. This was their headquarters. We did kind of a similar thing as the last time we visited Manifesto in Madrid, but kind of on a larger scale, I'd say, just because this office was much bigger, much more modern, kind of what you think of when you think of a marketing agency. It was really beautiful. They had like these like palm tree looking pillars, just very modern. And these, I just need to mention it real quick. These boxes, they're in Spain, there are these famous croissants, which you hear croissant, you think France, usually, if you haven't really been to Europe. And we got them at both manifestos. And actually, we also found the actual shop when we were in Barcelona, I'm pretty sure. Oh, yes, when we were in the smaller town. And They were created on accident, basically. They're these little croissants, and they were soaked in butter and then topped with chocolate and different toppings. And oh my God, they were so good. And I still dream about them, but that's all. We also did a case study here where we broke into groups, and you can see Morgan and I over there. I can't remember exactly what the case was, but I remember we did talk to our tour guide that was with us. And do you remember the case? Okay.
Alibaba has a European wing, and inside that is Miraflor, which is a Spanish shell to hide Alibaba. And they did the campaign for their summer sales.
Yes. It was a long time ago. And this was like one of our last days of our trip. I'm pretty sure it was long, not a lot of sleep, long trip, but awesome. So we ended up asking like what one of their popular music artists with young kids are, and it was Rosalia. And we played one of her songs in the background while we pitched our idea, and it was just fun, and we got some feedback, and it was just a really cool experience.
All right, now we're on to Gaudi, which is the architect / artist that I mentioned earlier. I put this photo of me on just so you could see like the different, like how large this building really is. This is La Sagrada Familia, and yeah, it's designed to the T, right? There's so much symbolism within this building. On the outside of the building, you can see it was under construction whenever we were there. But anyways, yeah, I decided to add these two photos as well because this is kind of showing the aesthetic of the front side of it, which is also in the second photo. And that is basically talking about the birth of Jesus Christ, and it's a very positive symbolism. It's also very organic. There's a lot of detail within that. This is the back side. And so basically what you do is you look at the front, you kind of get to walk through, which we'll see pictures of the inside in a second, and then you get to the back. And the back, as you can see, is extremely different than the front from an artist or architectural standpoint. And the symbolism behind the back of it was talking about the death of Jesus Christ. And so it kind of makes a full circle, which was really interesting. This is the inside of the building, kind of crazy, a lot more color than the outside. The colors were based off of warm colors on one side and cool colors on the other. Warm or south. Okay. So this is the south side then. And then the cool colors were coming in from the north. This is just a photo of stained glass as well, which was everywhere in the building. And this picture here on the end is just kind of showing how this enormous building is standing up. These were supposed to look kind of like tree-like organic forms. Gaudi was really into everything looking kind of organic. All right, and this is Park Güell. Okay, yeah, I got it. Which was also designed by Gaudi. There is kind of I don't know if you'd say a tradition or something where people try to find this butterfly here, because all of the mosaic is all broken up around this entire park in different areas, but the butterfly is complete. And so someone in our group, it was not me, found the butterfly. As you can see over here, there's a little bit more mosaic, and kind of like Sienna and I were calling it a gingerbread man house. Again, you can kind of see that's just Gaudi's style in his architecture. It's just very different, very modern, and his modernism is different than what it would be here. Lastly, this building up here, he also designed, which looks a bit different, but that was actually his house in the park. All right, this is the same park, but he used natural elements instead in his designs. So you can just see how these different rock formations have been created. And we're talking about how they symbolize waves. Yeah, yeah. we're thinking it's waves, which is kind of cool.
Okay, then rounding out our trip, we also visited Parliament in Barcelona, which the architecture was just beautiful. There were a lot of smaller rooms, I'd say, that all had different vibes to them. You can see one of them in the middle there. And our tour guide here was a professional tour guide, so it seemed more laid back. He was younger, and he answered our questions straight up, or he was trained very well to answer our questions so that we think he's answering them straight up. But it was definitely more of a laid back, more modernist feel while we were there, and just beautiful. Okay, last, my favorite part, the food. This was mine and Morgan's dinner we had with 3 other students after we went to the beach in Barcelona one day. We were walking around in Barcelona trying to find a place to eat dinner, and there were 5 of us. So everyone's like, no, we don't have room. No, we don't have room. It's going to be this long. It's going to be this long. And then finally we found this one restaurant. We're like, well, let's check it out. We kind of went around a corner in the back, and they take us into the basement. And we ended up having literally the best meal of our trip. I don't know. It was just fun, a fun vibe. Our waiter didn't speak a ton of English, but he was funny. He was laughing with us, just having a good time. And we just sat there for hours eating, and he just kept bringing us more stuff, always checking in. And it seemed like less of a touristy kind of thing. But we did get to have one of their popular dishes, which is the toasted bread, and then you rub a clove of garlic on it, and then the tomato, like a bruschetta. And it was just really great. And then we also visited the markets, and we could see what some markets were kind of more touristy, with food and cones like that and kind of smoothies. But we also saw the fish markets, which were just very cool to see.
So of course we got to have lessons learned, right? So Spain is not one homogeneous country. You have to market accordingly. We definitely saw that with the 3 different cities. But we do know that love of soccer is homogeneous, and it reflects much more than a sport. Just by the way they recruited, in schools in Barcelona as opposed to in Madrid. Hold on to your phones, especially in Barcelona. Hold on to your money. The other things that I want to bring up as a faculty member is trying to get the transportation a little bit easier and a little more cost effective. Don't go to JFK. That was crazy. But the other thing is trying to find more cost effective options. We did use the Bernstein grant, and all the students did a nice thank you note from Spanish cards. But there were a lot of other students that wanted to go, and it was just too cost prohibitive. So my goal, and I'm probably going to work with Carrie on this, is how can we get it more manageable from a cost perspective? So great trip. We were never bored, as you can see, and that was just the tip of the iceberg of the things we experienced. And I hope our goal is to encourage the students to keep going, especially the ones that have never been on a plane before. There's Andy, who was like, I'm going to start traveling now, right? So my question for you, what country should we go to next? And if there's any faculty here that want to go, we can market anywhere, and culture is everywhere. Thank you. Time for questions?
How much did it cost to go and see Barcelona play?
It wasn't that expensive. I'm trying to remember. Was it? I think it was like 70 USD. I would say between 50 and 70 USD, and we bought the tickets the day of, I would say, or the night before, one or the other. Yeah. It's not like going to a football game here.
Thank you very much for such a great cross-cultural experience brought to Alfred. This is just a perfect kind of presentation for World Anthropology Day, which today is.
Did they have stadium food like we do for most of our games here?
Yes, they had popcorn and I don't think they had like hot dogs or anything like that. They had popcorn. I think that was their big food, and they had drinks too. Um, they like served alcohol in their stadiums and stuff as well. But the cups, you had to like pay extra. They gave you a token, and if you return the cup, then you would like get your money back for it. They're like trying to reduce like waste and stuff, and so they had like real cups. That was different, but yeah.
So was there, like, what was the most or the biggest difference between marketing in Spain versus the United States?
I would say like there's not necessarily any like with like just the basis of marketing, but you always have to pay attention to pop culture and how they consume their media and things, which is a difference in every country you go to, really. So nothing specifically with like the basis of marketing, at least that we learned of, but they have different singers, they have different pop culture. Like we might market with football here, they might market with football or soccer there. It's just about knowing what your community wants.
I would say too, geography. You know how we talked about that small town that we went to, the commuter train and going in there. We saw no big brands. I don't think we saw any. So Barcelona and Madrid were very similar, and they had H&M and they had, you know, great big brands. And I think that experience, I know I appreciated it, going into the small town, seeing a real siesta, and then lots of still traditional small brands. In fact, we didn't see hardly, I don't think we saw any advertising except maybe in the train station of big brands. So I thought that was really interesting, that you still have very traditional brands in the smaller communities.
So when the students broke up to small groups in Manifesto in Madrid, the one group's pitch for the Christmas campaign did deal with the demographic differences in Spain of how many seniors they have, but in a kind of semi-negative way. And in the end, the campaign was one where you got your cool grandma or your cool aunt or uncle, older person, to buy you the tech that you really wish you could get. And so I think the students had a chance to see how an aging culture differently represents those people. I think that was one difference too.
It's me again. When I travel with my kids, and still do this, we play a game where you kind of suddenly open your eyes and say, how do you know you're not in America? Or how do you know you're in a certain country? And I've never been to Madrid. And I'd be interested to know what the street scene in Madrid is like whether there are homeless people, whether there are beggars, whether there are street musicians, whether the traffic is crazy, whether it's filthy like New York. I'd be interested to have a description of the street scene in New York, in Madrid.
So, definitely Madrid, like where we were staying, there were a lot of big brands and things like that, but also smaller restaurants. But I do want to add on that one day we were walking, we had gone a couple towns over and we were walking back to our hostel, very late at night, like I'd say between 2 and 4 a.m. And they actually had street cleaners out and they were like power washing all the streets like they do it every night. The trains were super duper clean. I didn't see a ton of homeless people at all, but there were a lot of street musicians, especially in Barcelona as well, which was really cool to walk through the smaller streets and alleys and hear the music, but not be able to see where it's coming from. You had a lot of acoustic guitars, singers, things like that.
And I would say too, like in terms of like recognizing we're not in the US anymore, the architecture was pretty different. There was a lot of terracotta, like warmer colors, but it was all like apartment styles down the roads. And it just looks so different than here.
Anything else? Well, if not, let's please thank them all again. and hope to see everybody next week.
Morgan, you're gonna get to your test on time? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yes, thank you. Oh, I wish I spoke Spanish for 30 years.
How are you? They were. That's